With a child in her arms and the weight of survival on her shoulders, she faces another day invisible to the eyes of the world, until a trivial detail, a random promotion, reignites a long-forgotten hope. What begins as distrust turns into emotion when someone sees in her more than appearances reveal. Sometimes, a single human gesture is enough to rewrite destinies that once seemed doomed. If this story interested you, subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you are watching from. Let's begin. The sun beat down on the sidewalks of Brightwater City that Friday afternoon. Carla Vance watched the movement on Arthur Penn Avenue with tired eyes, while her daughter Beatrice, just over a year old, slept soundly in her lap. The shadows of the building slowly advanced, offering small refuges from the heat that seemed to stick to her skin as a constant reminder of the difficult life she led. It had been 3 weeks since Carla had left the Rebirth Community Shelter to try her luck on the downtown streets. Not that the shelter was bad, but the strict time rules and lack of privacy made any attempt to rebuild a life with dignity impossible. There, sitting on the sidewalk in front of the commercial arcade, she tried to sell candies and gum to hurried passers-by, who barely noticed her presence. "Good morning, sir." "Gum, just $1, she repeated mechanically when someone passed close enough. Most averted their gaze, pretending not to hear. Others quickened their pace as if poverty were contagious. Beatrice stirred in her lap, bothered by the heat and noise. Carla adjusted the small towel that served as an improvised pillow and checked her diaper, which would last a few more hours. The pack with 3 remaining diapers was kept like a treasure in the worn backpack she carried everywhere. Life had not always been like this. Until 2 years ago, Carla worked as a kitchen assistant in a restaurant in the Sterling Heights neighborhood. She had a rented room in the back of a house in St. Teresa's Quarter, a simple but stable life. Then came the unplanned pregnancy, Beatrice's father who disappeared upon hearing the news, the restaurant that closed during the pandemic, the overdue rent, an avalanche of problems that pushed her onto the streets, into shelters, into invisibility. A crumpled flyer carried by the wind hit her foot. Normally Carla wouldn't even bother to pick it up. Just another piece of paper to litter the city, she thought. But the vibrant colors caught her attention. Red and gold with large letters, Grand Promotion Renewal Stores. There was a promotional scratch-off ticket printed on it, one of those that promised instant prizes no one ever won. On the back, the slogan, "Scratch and transform your day." Without much enthusiasm, she took a 50-cent coin from the pocket of her faded jeans and scratched off the gray layer covering the result. The harsh sound seemed too loud in the hustle and bustle of the avenue. Her eyes widened when she saw what was written under the scratched layer. A golden code and the phrase, "Congratulations. You won the grand prize." Carla felt her heart race. It couldn't be true. These things didn't happen to people like her. It must be some trick, some ploy to get people into the store to buy something. But something inside her, an almost extinguished flame of hope, made her stand up with Beatrice in her arms. She crossed the street towards the large renewal stores sign that shone a few meters away. The automatic doors hissed softly open. The air conditioning hit her like a refreshing wave, making her realize how sweaty and uncomfortable she was. She immediately felt out of place. The polished floor reflected the lights of the displays, and well-dressed sales associates attended to customers examining clothes, electronics, and household goods. Ambient music filled the space with a cheerful commercial melody. She hadn't taken 3 steps when a security guard materialized in front of her. Tall, broad-shouldered, in an impeccable navy blue uniform with a badge on his chest that read, "Security Roderick." "Can I help you, ma'am?" The question sounded like an order to leave. I have this." Carla extended the flyer with the scratch-off ticket, trying to maintain her dignity. "I think I won something." The security guard looked at the crumpled paper suspiciously, but called a sales associate who was passing by. The young woman, with her hair in a perfect ponytail and a red uniform with the store's logo, approached with a professional smile that quickly faded when she saw Carla. "What's wrong, Roderick?" "She says she won something in the promotion." The security guard handed the flyer to the sales associate, who quickly examined it. The sales associate's expression changed from suspicion to astonishment. She looked at the paper again, then at Carla, and finally at the security guard. "It's the golden code," she said in a low voice, as if fearing others would hear. I'll call management. The sales associate quickly walked away, leaving Carla standing there, holding Beatrice, who was beginning to wake up, while the security guard kept his eyes fixed on her, as if expecting her to try to steal something at any moment. Other customers began to stare, some with curiosity, others with thinly veiled disdain. Carla felt her face burn with shame. Beatrice began to whimper, bothered by the noise and lights. Carla rocked her gently, murmuring words of comfort while trying to ignore the stares. The sales associate returned accompanied by an older woman, with short grey hair and an impeccable posture, wearing a red business suit with a badge that read, Manager Marcia Sterling. "Good afternoon," the manager said, scrutinizing Carla from head to toe. "I'm Marcia Sterling, manager of this branch. Amanda showed me your coupon. Could you please accompany me to the administrative office?" Without waiting for an answer, the manager began walking towards the back of the store. Carla hesitated, looking at the security guard who gestured for her to follow. With Beatrice now fully awake and looking around with curiosity, Carla followed the manager, feeling like a criminal being led in for interrogation. The administrative office was small, with several desks, computers, and a large TV showing security camera footage. The manager indicated a chair for Carla and sat on the other side of a desk. "This coupon," Marcia began, holding the flyer with her fingertips as if it might contaminate her, "is part of a special promotion we launched for the Renewal Network's anniversary. The golden code is the grand prize?" "And what did I win?" Carla asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "The prize includes a shopping voucher worth $10,000 for use at any store in the network, plus a living room and bedroom furniture set." Carla felt as if the floor had disappeared beneath her feet. $10,000. It was more money than she had seen in the last 2 years combined. She could rent a place to live, buy decent clothes, enough diapers for Beatrice, real food. Is this serious? The words came out before she could stop them. The manager smiled, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. "Perfectly serious. However, we need to verify your identity and process the necessary paperwork. Do you have any identification documents?" Carla's heart sank. Her ID and social security number were kept at the shelter, in a plastic folder, where she kept the few documents she had managed to preserve. She only carried Beatrice's birth certificate with her, folded and protected in a plastic bag. "I only have my daughter's birth certificate with me. My documents are at the shelter where we sometimes sleep." The manager's expression hardened. "I understand. Unfortunately, without proper documentation, we cannot process the prize immediately. We will have to—" She was interrupted by a knock at the door. A middle-aged man entered without waiting for a response. He wore jeans, a light blue dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows, and simple but good quality shoes. He wore no badge or visible identification. His brown eyes were calm and observant. "Excuse me, Marcia. I heard we have a golden code winner." The manager immediately stood up, her face transformed into a respectful smile. "Mr. Meadows, I didn't know you were at the store today. Yes, this lady presented the winning coupon, but we have a small documentation problem." The man looked at Carla and Beatrice with genuine interest, without the judgment she had faced since entering the store. He approached and extended his hand. "I'm Edward Meadows. Nice to meet you." "Carla Vance," she replied, shaking his hand with hesitation. "And this is Beatrice." Edward smiled at the child, who watched him with curiosity. Then he turned to the manager. "What's the problem with the documentation?" "She doesn't have identification documents with her, only the child's birth certificate. Without an ID and social security number, we cannot process the prize according to the regulations." Edward seemed to think for a moment, then asked Carla, "Do you have documents somewhere?" "At the rebirth shelter in the East End. I keep everything there because I'm afraid of losing them or having them stolen on the street." "A sensible decision," Edward commented, before turning to the manager. "Marcia, let's do this. Ms. Vance will retrieve her documents while we prepare the shopping voucher and begin the process for furniture delivery. When she returns, we'll finalize everything." "But, sir, the regulations require immediate identification for prize validation," the manager protested. "And we need to verify that the coupon hasn't been tampered with." Edward held out his hand, and Marcia handed him the flyer with the scratch-off ticket. He quickly examined it. "The code is correct. And as for the regulations," and he smiled, "I think we can make an exception." After all, rules exist to serve people, not the other way around. The manager seemed to want to argue, but only nodded. As you prefer, sir. Edward turned to Carla again. How much time do you need to retrieve your documents? 2 hours, maybe. Depends on the bus. Perfect. The store will be open until 10 o'clock tonight. If you return by then, we can resolve everything today. Carla nodded, still stunned by the situation. This man, who seemed to have authority over the manager, was actually helping her without asking questions, without judging her appearance or condition. Thank you, she managed to say. I'll be back as soon as possible. Excellent, Edward replied. Then he took an envelope from a nearby desk, pulled out a business card, and wrote something on the back before handing it to Carla. If you have any trouble on your way back, show this. Carla looked at the card. On the front it read Edward Meadows, Executive Director, Renewal Group. On the back there was a handwritten message. I authorize the processing of the prize for Carla Vance. Edward Meadows. Only then did Carla realize who the man in front of her was. Not a mere employee, but the company's director himself. She wanted to say something, to thank him properly, but the words caught in her throat. Edward seemed to understand. Take your time. We'll be waiting. When Carla left the store, with Beatrice in her arms and the card kept like a treasure, she looked at the sky that was beginning to take on orange hues. For the first time in a long time, she felt that maybe, just maybe, life was about to change. On the way to the bus stop, she didn't see Edward watching her from the store window. She didn't see him take his phone from his pocket and make a quick call. She didn't hear him say, I found her. After all these years, I finally found her. 2 hours and 40 minutes later, Carla returned to the renewal store, breathless and worried about the delay. The bus had taken longer than usual, and she had to run from the stop to the store with Beatrice in her arms, fearing they would close or give up waiting for her. But upon entering, she was greeted by the same sales associate from before, who smiled more genuinely this time. Good evening, Ms. Vance. We were expecting you. Please follow me. Carla followed the sales associate to the administrative office, where Marcia, the manager, awaited with a much friendlier expression than before. Glad you're back, the manager said, indicating the chair. Did you manage to bring your documents? Carla nodded, pulling a yellow plastic folder with her documents from her bag. She handed her ID and social security number to the manager, who quickly examined them and began filling out a form on the computer. Mr. Meadows had to leave, Marcia explained as she typed. But he left everything arranged. I'll finalize your registration in the system and issue the shopping voucher right away. As for the furniture, we'll need an address for delivery. Carla felt a knot in her throat. I don't have a fixed address at the moment. The manager stopped typing and looked at her over her glasses, but instead of the disapproval Carla expected, she saw something akin to understanding. Mr. Meadows anticipated this possibility. He suggested we keep the furniture in our warehouse until you have a place to receive it. The shopping voucher is valid for 1 year, so you can use it gradually, as needed. He thought of everything, didn't he? Carla commented, impressed by the consideration. Mr. Meadows is different from most executives, the manager replied, resuming typing. He genuinely cares about people. After a few minutes, Marcia printed the shopping voucher, an official document with the renewal logo, the value of $10,000. Sueshu and Carla's full name. She also printed a certificate for the furniture, which could be chosen from various options available in the network's stores. Done, the manager said, handing the documents to Carla. Everything is official. You can start using the shopping voucher immediately if you wish. Our store will close in an hour, but tomorrow will be open from 9. Thank you, Carla replied, holding the papers as if they were made of gold. Thank you very much. As she was about to leave, the manager added, Oh, Mr. Meadows also left this for you, and handed her a sealed white envelope. Carla opened the envelope right there. Inside was a handwritten letter and another smaller envelope. Dear Ms. Carla, the letter read, I hope this prize can help you rebuild your life and offer a better future for your daughter. Sometimes all we need is an opportunity to show our strength. The enclosed envelope contains a small extra that is not part of the official prize. Consider it an investment in your future. You deserve a fresh start. This is just the beginning. Sincerely, Edward Meadows. With trembling hands, Carla opened the second envelope. Inside there were $500 bills and a card for a small inn in the St. Euphemia quarter, with a note, "Paid for 1 week, room 15. The tears Carla had been holding back since entering the store finally flowed. Beatrice, in her lap, touched her wet face with curiosity. "We'll have a place to sleep tonight, my daughter," Carla whispered, kissing the little one's forehead. "A place just for us." As she left the store, Brightwater City's night sky was starry as Carla hadn't observed in a long time. Perhaps because she rarely had the time or inclination to look up. Or perhaps, she thought, as she walked towards the taxi stand with the shopping voucher, the letter and the envelope safely tucked away, because now there was, finally, a reason to look ahead. Edward Meadows, sitting in his car in the store's parking lot, watched as Carla left with Beatrice in her arms. He waited until she got into a taxi and departed before starting the engine. On the passenger seat, an old folder contained newspaper, clippings, a private investigator's report, and a faded photograph of a woman who looked very much like Carla, only 20 years younger. "First stage complete," he murmured to himself as he drove home. "Now comes the hardest part." The St. Clair Inn was an old 3-story building, painted in faded yellow, located on a quiet street in St. Euphemia quarter. When Carla arrived with Beatrice, it was already past 10 at night. The receptionist, a grey-haired lady with a welcoming smile, checked her name in a register book. "Ah yes, room 15, second floor. Mr. Meadows called to let us know you were coming. It's all paid for 7 days, with breakfast included." She handed her the key and pointed to the stairs. "There's a crib in the room as requested. If you need anything else, just call." Room 15 was simple but clean and cozy. A double bed with a floral bedspread, a small wardrobe, a table with a chair by the window, a private bathroom, and, as promised, a crib set up next to the bed. There was also a small television on a wall mount and a ceiling fan. For Carla, who had been sleeping in shelters and occasionally on park benches, it seemed like a palace. She bathed Beatrice in the clean bathtub, using the soap and shampoo provided by the inn. Then she dressed her daughter in one of the few clean clothes she still had and put her in the crib, where the little one fell asleep almost instantly, exhausted after the long day of emotions. Carla took a long shower, letting the water wash away the fatigue and dust of the streets. Wrapped in a soft towel, she sat on the bed and opened the envelope with the shopping voucher again. $10,000, and another $500 in cash that Edward Meadows had given her. It wasn't a fortune, but it represented a real chance for a fresh start. "What do I do now?" she murmured to herself, looking at Beatrice asleep in the crib. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to dream. Maybe she could rent a permanent room, or even a small apartment, buy proper clothes, look for a job. But without references, with a small child and a long period of unemployment, her chances were slim. She needed something more, an idea, a plan. Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock on the door. She quickly dressed in the same worn clothes and opened a crack, cautiously. The receptionist smiled, holding a tray. "Sorry to bother you so late, but I thought you might be hungry. I brought a sandwich and some milk. Breakfast isn't served until 7 tomorrow. Carla felt her eyes well up again. So much kindness, all of a sudden, after so long of being treated with indifference or disdain. "Thank you very much," she said, taking the tray. "That's very kind of you." "It's nothing, dear. Mr. Meadows asked us to take good care of you." The receptionist said goodbye with a wave, and Carla closed the door, thoughtful. Who was this Edward? Meadows, really? Why was he being so generous to a complete stranger? There was something strange about the whole situation, but she was too tired to think about it now. She ate the sandwich voraciously. She couldn't remember the last time she had a decent meal, and drank the milk slowly, savoring every sip. She fell asleep with the TV on low volume, dreaming of possibilities that, until a few hours ago, seemed completely out of reach. For the next morning, Carla woke to Beatrice babbling in the crib. The sun streamed through the curtain gaps, illuminating the room with a golden light. For a moment, She was disoriented, not recognizing where she was. Then, the memories of the previous day came back like a wave. The scratch-off ticket, the store, Edward Meadows, the prize. She got up quickly and checked if the documents were still there, fearing that it was all just an elaborate dream created by her exhausted mind. But the shopping voucher was real, as was the money and the certificate for the furniture. She sighed, in relief, and picked up Beatrice, who smiled at seeing her mother. "Good morning, my love. Did you sleep well in your new bed?" After changing Beatrice's diaper, using one of the last ones she had, she went down for breakfast. The inn's small dining area had only 5 tables, and 2 of them were occupied by other guests. The receptionist from the night before, who apparently also handled breakfast, smiled when she saw them. "Good morning. I hope you slept well. We have bread, cake, fruit, coffee, milk, and juice. Help yourselves." Carla placed Beatrice in an available high chair and prepared a plate with chopped fruit for her daughter, as well as some bread softened in milk. For herself, she served coffee, bread with butter, and cake. They ate with appetite, Beatrice especially excited about the fresh fruit, a rare luxury in her diet. As they ate, Carla thought about what she would do first. She needed clothes for both of them, more diapers for Beatrice, toiletries, but above all she needed a plan for when the week at the inn ended. The $10,000 could last a few months if she was very economical, but eventually it would run out, and then she would be back to square one. After breakfast, she returned to the room to organize her few belongings. She found at the bottom of her backpack an old notebook she used to jot down recipes when she worked as a kitchen assistant. She leafed through the pages, remembering how much she enjoyed cooking, especially sweets and savory snacks for parties. It was something she knew how to do well. An idea began to form in her mind. What if she used part of the money to buy basic ingredients and equipment to make sweets and savory snacks? She could sell them at farmers' markets, or even door-to-door in the commercial buildings downtown. She knew simple recipes that didn't require many ingredients or sophisticated equipment. Excited by the possibility, she made a quick list of what she would need: a thermal basket, disposable packaging, basic ingredients like flour, sugar, eggs, milk, plus a portable stove and some pots. All of this would easily fit into the shopping voucher's budget. She left the inn with Beatrice, determined to start her new life immediately. First, she went to a pharmacy and bought diapers, wet wipes, diaper rash cream, and other essential items for her daughter. Then she headed to a department store, where she bought simple but quality clothes for both of them. 3 outfits for herself, 5 for Beatrice, plus shoes and underwear. At the renewal store, she used part of the shopping voucher to purchase the portable stove, pots, kitchen utensils, and a large thermal basket. At a nearby supermarket, she bought the necessary ingredients to start her snack production. She returned to the inn in the late afternoon, laden with bags, but with a light heart. The receptionist helped her carry the groceries up and smiled when she heard about her plans. "What a great idea, dear. In fact, if you want to test your recipes, I can buy some sweets to serve at the inn's breakfast. Our guests would love them." Carla thanked her, moved by the support. That same night, after putting Beatrice to sleep, she organized her new belongings and prepared the dough for the first savory snacks she would make the next morning. 3 days later, Carla's small production was in full swing. The inn room had been transformed into an improvised mini kitchen, with the portable stove safely installed on the table, out of Beatrice's reach. She woke up early, prepared fresh savory snacks and sweets, and went out to sell them at strategic points in the city. Her first attempt was at Liberty Square, near several government offices, where employees usually had snacks during breaks. With a clean apron and the thermal basket decorated with a colorful cloth, she offered savory pies, croquettes, cheese bread with fillings, and chocolate truffles. To her surprise, she sold everything in less than 2 hours. The next day, she increased production and tried another spot, this time near the law school. Again, the success was instant. Students loved the fresh, well-made snacks at affordable prices. The inn's receptionist, Mrs. Teresa, became her first regular customer, buying sweets daily for the inn's breakfast. She also helped Carla promote her work among acquaintances, which resulted in some orders for meetings and small events. On the 6th day, while selling her products at the St. Teresa's Quarter Market, she noticed a man observing her from a distance. It took her a few minutes to recognize him, Edward Meadows. He wore simple clothes, jeans, a white t-shirt, and a cap that partially obscured his face, but it was definitely him. When their eyes met, he smiled and approached. "Good morning, Miss Vance. I see you're doing very well." "Mr. Meadows," she exclaimed, surprised. Yes, I'm trying." He looked at the basket, already half empty after 2 hours at the market. "May I try one?" "Of course." She offered him a cheese bread stuffed with pepperoni sausage, one of her most popular creations. Edward tasted it with genuine interest and nodded, approving. "It's delicious. You have talent." "Thank you. I worked in a restaurant for a few years." He bought a few more items, paying the exact amount, without making any comment about the fact that, indirectly, it was her own money she was using to start the business. Then he looked at Beatrice, who was playing peacefully in a portable playpen Carla had bought. "She seems happy," he commented. "She is. Having a roof over her head, regular food, and clean clothes made all the difference." Edward nodded thoughtfully. "The week at the inn ends tomorrow. Have you thought about what you'll do next?" The question caught Carla by surprise. She had been so focused on making her small business work that she had avoided thinking about what she would do when she had to leave the inn. She knew she needed to find a place to live, but with only 6 days of sales, she didn't yet have enough money to rent a decent apartment. "Not yet," she admitted, "but sales are going well. Soon I'll be able to afford something small." Edward seemed to consider something for a moment, then pulled a folded paper from his pocket and handed it to her. "I have a proposal. I own a small apartment in the Civic Center district that is vacant. It's an old property that belonged to my mother. I'm willing to rent it for a below-market value, without the bureaucracy of a guarantor or deposit. Just a simple contract between us." Carla looked at the paper, which had an address and some basic information about the apartment. It was an incredible chance, but suspicion returned. Why was this man, a successful executive, caring so much about her? What did he want in return? "Why are you doing all this for me? You don't even know me." Edward maintained a steady gaze. "Let's say I'm investing in someone who has shown determination and resilience. Besides, I like to help when I can. You don't have to accept, it's just an option." Carla folded the paper and put it away. "I'll think about it. Thank you for the offer. Of course, my contact information is there too. Let me know what you decide." He said goodbye with a nod and walked away, blending into the market crowd. Carla watched him until he disappeared, a mixture of gratitude and suspicion stirring in her chest. That afternoon, after returning to the inn and counting the day's sales, almost $200 in profit, her best result yet, Carla sat on the bed with the paper Edward had given her. The address was in a good area, near commercial spots where she could sell her products. The proposed rent was less than half of what was usually charged in the area. She weighed the pros and cons. On one hand, it seemed too good to be true, and there was something strange about Edward's interest in her. On the other hand, it was a unique opportunity, and he hadn't shown any inappropriate behavior so far. She decided she would at least see the apartment before making a decision. She called the number indicated and arranged a visit for the next morning. The apartment was on the 3rd floor of an old but well-maintained building on a tree-lined street in the Civic Center district. Edward was waiting for her at the entrance, holding a folder with documents. "Good morning, Miss Vance, thank you for coming." He led her to the apartment, a simple but airy 2-bedroom apartment with hardwood floors, a small open-plan kitchen, a guest bathroom, and a compact utility area. The rooms were lit by large windows overlooking the street. There was some basic furniture, a double bed, a sofa, a table with 4 chairs, and a built-in wardrobe in the hallway. "The furniture can stay if you want," Edward explained. "It belonged to my mother and has been here since she passed away. Or we can replace them with the ones you won in the promotion when you're ready to receive them." Carla walked through the apartment, visualizing what it would be like to live there with Beatrice. It was infinitely better than the room she rented before. And the rent, though still significant for her current budget, it was fair considering the neighborhood and the property's condition. "It's perfect," she finally admitted, "but I still don't understand why you're offering me all this." Edward opened the folder he was carrying and pulled out a simple lease agreement. "As I said before, I like to help when I can. Look at the contract. It's standard, except for the absence of a guarantor and deposit. Initial 3 months renewable if both parties agree. Carla read the contract carefully. Everything seemed to be in order. Her suspicion still existed, but the need for a safe home for Beatrice spoke louder. "I accept," she finally said, "but I will pay the rent on time without delays. I don't want continuous charity." "It's not charity," Edward replied firmly. "It's an opportunity. And I'm confident you'll make good use of it." They signed the contract in duplicate. Edward handed her the keys and explained some details about the building, such as the electronic gates operation and trash collection days. "You can move in whenever you want. The apartment is ready for you." Carla thanked him, still a little stunned by how quickly her life was changing. "We'll move in tomorrow, then. The in-stay ends at noon." Edward nodded. "Perfect. Oh, I almost forgot." He took an envelope from the inside pocket of his jacket. This arrived at the company headquarters. Apparently, someone posted a video of the moment you received the prize. "It's circulating on social media." Carla took the envelope, worried. "A video? But who would do that?" "Probably a customer who was in the store that day. The video shows you being initially stopped by security, then the confusion when they discovered the coupon was legitimate, and finally the moment you received prize confirmation. The camera captured your expression of shock and relief, with Beatrice in your arms looking curiously at everything. The caption read, "Homeless woman wins grand prize in promotion and has her life transformed. Share so more people believe in fresh starts." The video had thousands of views and hundreds of comments, most positive, wishing her luck and celebrating the happy ending. Others questioned whether the story was true or a marketing ploy by the store. Some asked where she was now, if she had really managed to get off the streets. One comment in particular caught her attention. "I know this woman from the rebirth shelter. She didn't tell the whole story. There's much more behind it." The user, identified only as Truth Revealed, hinted at knowing details about her past. Carla felt a chill. There were things in her history she preferred to leave behind, especially those related to how she ended up on the streets and Beatrice's father. She turned off her phone, disturbed. The unexpected exposure could bring complications she didn't want to face now, just as she was beginning to rebuild her life. She decided to ignore the video and comments, focusing only on her small snack business and adapting to her new home. In the following days, Carla established a routine. She woke up early, prepared savory snacks and sweets, left Beatrice with Mrs. Teresa, who offered to care for the little one in exchange for help with some tasks at the inn, and went out to sell her products. Gradually, she built a regular clientele and began receiving small orders for parties and events. A week after moving in, she found a note under her door upon returning home. There was no signature, just a handwritten message. "Keep going. You're achieving more than you imagine." She recognized Edward's handwriting, the same as on the card she had received the day of the prize. She kept the note in a small box where she was beginning to collect small mementos of her new life. The winning coupon, the first money she earned from sales, a hair ribbon she bought for Beatrice. The mystery surrounding Edward Meadows persisted, but now it was mixed with growing trust. Whatever his reason for helping her, so far it had only brought good things into her life. And that for now was enough. What Carla didn't know was that Edward kept an increasingly thick folder about her. Old newspaper clippings, reports, photographs, and a birth certificate yellowed with age, on which her full name read, Carla Vance Meadows. 3 months passed since Carla and Beatrice moved into the apartment in the Civic Center district. Life had acquired a stability Carla hadn't dared to dream of half a year ago. Her small business of savory snacks and sweets prospered daily. She now had regular clients, 3 coffee shops that bought her products daily, in addition to regular orders for business meetings and small events. With the help of a neighbor who had become a friend, Jane, Carla managed to register as an individual micro-entrepreneur, IME, which allowed her to issue invoices and formalize her business. She also created a small brand, Carla's Delights, with a colorful logo that Jane, who worked in graphic design, created for her at a symbolic price. Beatrice, now almost a year and a half old, attended a community daycare in the mornings, which allowed Carla to dedicate more time to food production. The little one was more talkative, healthy, and cheerful, charming everyone with her curious eyes and easy smile. The apartment, Previously with only basic furniture, now also featured items from the Renewal Store prize, a new sofa, an elegant dining table, a comfortable bed for Carla, and a child's bed for Beatrice, who would soon leave the crib. The walls, once bare, now displayed photos of the little one, and some colourful pictures Carla had found at a craft fair. However, not everything was tranquil. The video that had circulated on social media months ago gained new traction after a local television program featured inspirational stories. Without her knowledge or authorization, Carla's story was included, with images from the original video and dramatized narrations about how a homeless person had her life transformed by incredible luck. The TV report generated a wave of curiosity. Reporters tried to locate her, and some people began to recognize her on the streets. One afternoon, while selling her products in a downtown square, she was approached by a man with a microphone and a camera. "Carla Vance? We'd like to do an interview for the City Journal. Your story has inspired many people and—" "I'm not interested," she cut him off, quickly putting her products back in the thermal basket. "Please respect my privacy," the reporter insisted, following her as she tried to walk away. "Is it true that you lived on the streets with your daughter? How did you manage to turn your life around so quickly? There are rumors that you received special help from the owner of the Renewal Store. Do you have any connection?" The questions hit her like arrows. How did they know about Edward's help? Who was spreading these rumors? "I have nothing to declare," she replied, trying to remain calm as she hurried away. "Please leave me alone." She arrived home shaken. She let Beatrice play on the living room rug while she tried to organize her thoughts. The unexpected exposure threatened her newfound tranquility. Furthermore, the insinuations about a possible connection with Edward Meadows worried her. Not that there was anything wrong. He had merely been a generous benefactor, a businessman doing charity. But the truth was, she herself didn't fully understand his interest in helping her. Since moving into the apartment, Edward appeared occasionally. Never unannounced, always respectful, usually bringing some small gift for Beatrice. They talked about pleasantries, about how her business was doing, about the new skills Beatrice was developing. He never attempted any inappropriate advances, never hinted at wanting anything in return for his help. He behaved more like a distant uncle or a mentor than a landlord collecting rent. Carla picked up the phone and called him. She needed to understand what was happening. "Edward, it's Carla. Can we talk?" "It's important." An hour later, they were sitting on the apartment's small balcony. Beatrice was playing inside, entertained with colored blocks. Edward listened attentively as Carla recounted the incident with the reporter and her concerns about media exposure. "I'm sorry about that," he said when she finished. "I didn't imagine your story would gain so much repercussion. The media always seeks emotional stories, and yours, unfortunately for your privacy, has all the elements they love." "But how do they know about your help? About the apartment? About all of this?" she asked, distressed. "I've never spoken to anyone except close people." Edward seemed genuinely concerned. "I don't know. Maybe someone from the store, someone from the inn." News travels fast in a city like Brightwater City, especially when it involves well-known people. "Well-known people like you," Carla concluded. "That's why they're interested. It's not just about me. It's about why a successful businessman decided to help a stranger living on the streets." She paused, then asked what she had been putting off for months. "Edward, why did you help me?" "The truth, please." He averted his gaze for a moment, observing the city skyline that stretched beyond the balcony. When he looked back at her, there was something different in his eyes, a mixture of determination and fear. "Carla, there are things I need to tell you, but it's not a simple conversation nor a quick one. And perhaps it's best if it happens at another time, when you're calmer, and we can talk without interruptions. There's always something more, isn't there?" She shook her head, frustrated. "From the beginning, I felt there was something strange about all of this. Nobody just helps a stranger like that for no reason." "You're not a stranger to me," he replied, so softly she almost didn't hear him. Before she could question what he meant, he continued in a firmer tone. "As for the media, I can help. I have contacts who can contain this story, ensure your privacy is respected. But that might mean giving some answers, creating a narrative that satisfies their curiosity without exposing personal details. What kind of narrative? We can say that Renewal is implementing a social responsibility program, helping vulnerable people restart their lives. Your case would be the pilot project, and its success is inspiring the program's expansion. This would shift the focus from you as an individual and direct it towards the corporate initiative. Carla considered the proposal. It made sense and could indeed reduce the pressure on her, but it still left the central question unanswered. Why her? Why was Edward Meadows, a rich and powerful man, so interested in her life? All right, she finally agreed, and do it. But Edward, this conversation you're postponing, it needs to happen soon. I can't keep living with this feeling that there's something important I don't know about my own life. He nodded, serious. I promise. As soon as I resolve this issue with the media, we'll talk. You deserve to know the truth. After Edward left, Carla sat on the sofa watching Beatrice play. The little one was now stacking blocks with concentration, babbling incomprehensible words as she worked. Her innocence and simple joy were a stark contrast to the confusion Carla felt. What truth could Edward be hiding? What could be so important as to explain all the interest and help she had received? Part of her feared finding out, as if the truth could threaten the fragile stability she had achieved. Another part yearned for answers, tired of living with questions that seemed to never end. The next day, as promised, Edward acted. An official statement from the Renewal Network was sent to the press announcing the launch of the Renew program, a social responsibility initiative aimed at the economic reintegration of vulnerable people. The statement briefly mentioned a successful pilot case that had inspired the project, but did not name names or personal details. The strategy worked. Reporters now turned their attention to the program itself, seeking information about how it would work, how many people would benefit, how they would be selected. The focus on Carla diminished, although occasionally someone still recognized her on the streets. 2 weeks passed without Edward mentioning the promised conversation. Carla was beginning to think he had changed his mind when she received a message on her phone. Can we talk tomorrow? It's important. I can pick you up after you drop Beatrice at daycare. She replied with a simple yes, feeling a mix of anxiety and relief. She would finally know what was behind it all. The next morning, Edward was waiting for her in his car, a discreet black sedan, in front of the daycare. Carla got into the vehicle after dropping off Beatrice, noting how tense he seemed, his hands gripping the steering wheel with unnecessary force. "Where are we going?" she asked, adjusting her seatbelt. "To a place where we can talk without interruptions. Trust me." They drove in silence for about 20 minutes, leaving downtown Brightwater City towards a more secluded, tree-lined and quiet neighborhood. Edward stopped the car in front of a 2-story house, old in style but well-maintained, with a carefully kept front garden. "What place is this?" Carla asked when he turned off the engine. "My house," he replied simply, getting out of the car and walking around to open her door. Carla hesitated before getting out. She had never been to his house before. All previous interactions had occurred in public places or in her apartment. Going to his house seemed to cross some kind of invisible line they had tacitly established. Noting her hesitation, Edward added, "We need privacy for this conversation, and there are things here I need to show you." She nodded and followed him to the entrance. The house inside was elegant but without ostentation. Dark wood furniture, discreet artworks on the walls, many books. It wasn't what she would expect from a rich executive's house, but somehow it matched Edward's personality, at least what she knew of it. He led her to a spacious living room, where large windows allowed natural light to enter. He indicated a sofa for her to sit on and asked if she would like something to drink. Carla refused, impatient for answers. Edward sat in an armchair opposite her and took a deep breath, like someone preparing for something difficult. "Carla, what I'm about to tell you will seem incredible at first. I only ask that you let me finish before asking questions or drawing conclusions." She nodded, feeling her mouth dry despite her earlier refusal of the offered drink. 27 years ago, he began, "My younger brother, Richard Meadows, met a young woman named Helen Vance during a trip to Goldfield. It was instant passion, the kind that changes lives. They were very young. He was 20, she was 19, and came from different worlds. Richard was from a traditional and affluent family. Helen, of humble origin, worked as a tour guide while studying history at the Federal University. Carla felt a shiver run down her spine upon hearing her mother's name. Helen Vance. Edward had certainly investigated her past, but where was he going with this story? When Richard returned to Brightwater City, he couldn't stop thinking about Helen. He went back to Goldfield several times in the following months just to see her. Eventually, she agreed to move here to be together. Our family did not approve of the relationship. Richard's parents, my parents, were extremely traditional and considered Helen unsuitable, no respectable family background, no money with ideas too progressive for their taste. Edward paused, his eyes fixed on a distant point, as if reliving painful memories. Despite the opposition, they got married. A simple ceremony with few guests. I went, even against our parents' wishes. Richard was my only brother, and I loved him despite our differences. He was always the family rebel, while I followed the traditional path, taking over the businesses, doing what was expected of me. He sighed, then continued. A year after the wedding, Helen became pregnant. My parents, despite everything, were excited about the idea of a grandchild. They began to approach, to try a reconciliation. Things seemed to be improving. Then, his voice faltered, then the accident happened. Carla felt a knot form in her throat. She already knew what was coming next, or at least part of it. Her mother had never talked much about the past, but had mentioned an accident, a tragedy that changed everything. Richard was driving. A rainy night, a sharp curve on the road to Silver Creek. The car skidded, rolled over multiple times. Helen survived, severely injured, but she survived. Richard did not. He stopped again, visibly emotional. Carla wanted to say something, but the words seemed stuck in her throat. Edward took a deep breath before continuing. Helen was 7 months pregnant when the accident happened. Doctors managed to stabilize her, and the baby suffered no apparent harm. But the psychological trauma was devastating. She lost her husband, was hospitalized for weeks, and when she left the hospital, she found a hostile family waiting for her. My parents, Edward shook his head, as if he still couldn't believe it. They blamed Helen for the accident. It was irrational, unfair, but pain blinded them. They said horrible things, threatened to take custody of the baby when it was born, claiming she would be an incapable mother. It was cruel and unforgivable. Carla felt tears forming in her eyes. The story coincided with fragments her mother had shared over the years, always reluctantly and incompletely. Helen fled, disappeared without a trace. I tried to find her, I swear I tried. I didn't agree with my parents' stance. I wanted to help her, ensure that she and the baby, my nephew or niece, were well, but she had vanished completely. Edward stood up, went to a bookshelf and took out an old wooden box. He sat down again and opened it on the coffee table between them. Inside were photographs, letters, documents. For years I hired private investigators. I followed false leads, rumors, anything that could lead me to Helen and the child. I discovered she had given birth to a girl, that they had lived in several small towns in Mindshire, always moving as if fearing being found, that the girl had been registered only with her mother's surname, Vance, probably to make any connection to the Meadows family difficult. He took a photograph from the box. A young, smiling woman, with dark hair and lively eyes, hugging a jovial-looking man. Helen and Richard, Carla's parents. I found this photo among Richard's belongings after he passed. It's one of the few I have of them together. Carla took the photograph with trembling hands. She recognized her mother immediately, much younger than she remembered, but unmistakable. And next to her, the father she had never known. She felt a wave of emotion so intense she could barely breathe. About 15 years ago, I completely lost track of them, Edward continued. The investigators found nothing. It was as if they had disappeared off the map. Then 2 years ago, I received a tip. Helen had passed away in a public hospital in Countville. Carla couldn't hold back the sob that escaped her throat. Her mother's passing, a victim of fulminant cancer, was still an open wound. I'm so sorry, Edward said, genuinely regretful. When I found out, it was too late. I then tried to find her daughter, my niece, who, according to the information I obtained, was named Carla. But again, the trail had gone cold. He leaned forward, looking directly into her eyes. Until that day at the renewal store, when I saw you walk in. With your daughter in your arms, it was like seeing a ghost. You are identical to Helen when she was young. And your name, Carla Vance. It couldn't be a coincidence. Why didn't you say anything from the beginning? She asked, finally finding her voice. Why all this mystery? I feared your reaction, that you wouldn't believe me, that you'd think it was some kind of scam or manipulation, or worse, that you'd reject me completely because of what my family did to your mother. I wanted to get to know you first, help you out of the difficult situation you were in, earn your trust. Perhaps that was wrong, even manipulative, but I was so desperate to connect with you, with the last link I had to my brother. Carla looked again at the photograph in her hands, then at Edward. Now she could see the resemblance between him and the man in the photo, her father, Richard. The same eyes, the same face shape, though Richard seemed more jovial, more free. You are my niece, Carla, Edward said, his voice choked. My brother Richard's daughter, part of my family. Since I found you, I've been trying to gather the courage to tell you all this, and when I saw Beatrice, my great niece, I couldn't help but think how much Richard would have loved to meet her. A heavy silence settled between them, filled only by the distant sound of birds in the garden and the ticking of an old clock on the wall. Carla felt stunned, as if the world around her was spinning at a different speed than normal. My mother never talked much about the past, she finally said. Only fragments, incomplete stories. She said my father had left when she was pregnant, that his family was rich and powerful, and didn't want her around. She never mentioned names, never went into details. I think it was too painful for her. Edward nodded, understanding. Helen must have suffered a lot. What my parents did was unforgivable. They have both passed, without ever having known you. It's one of my biggest regrets not having done more, not having tried harder to find them sooner. After Mom passed, Carla continued, the words now pouring out, everything fell apart. I was pregnant with Beatrice. Her father disappeared when I told him about the pregnancy. I couldn't keep up with the rent for the small apartment we shared. I lost my job during the pandemic. It was as if the universe was conspiring against me. I ended up on the streets in shelters, fighting to survive and keep Beatrice safe. And now you're rebuilding your life, with a strength you certainly inherited from Helen. Edward smiled, a sad smile but full of pride. When I saw you that day at the store, I knew immediately who you were, not just by your appearance but by the determination in your eyes, even amidst despair. He took out a few more documents from the box. I have here your parents' marriage certificate, the deed to a small property that belonged to Richard, and that legally should have passed to you after he passed. Some savings he kept in a separate account. All of this is yours by right, Carla. It always has been. Carla looked at the documents, feeling as if she were living a strange dream. From homeless woman to budding entrepreneur, and now heir to a man she never knew, it was too surreal to absorb all at once. I need time, she finally said, to process all of this. It's a lot to take in. Of course, Edward replied, understanding. Take all the time you need. These documents are yours, take them. Examine them. Think about everything we talked about. I'm here when you want to talk more. Ask questions, learn more about your father, about our family. He hesitated, then added, Carla, regardless of what you decide, if you want to keep your distance, if you need more time, know that the apartment is yours. It wasn't a real rental. The property belonged to Richard, and legally it's already yours. As is the money in the account I mentioned. I don't want you to feel pressured or obligated to accept a family relationship with me if that's not what you desire. Carla nodded, unable to formulate a coherent response. She was overwhelmed with information, emotions, revelations that completely changed her understanding of herself and her history. When Edward drove her back to pick up Beatrice at daycare, they hardly spoke during the journey, each lost in their own thoughts, processing what that conversation meant and what would come next. As they said goodbye, Edward asked hesitantly, Can I continue visiting you occasionally? Get to know Beatrice better? I understand if you need space, but you can, Carla interrupted, surprising herself with the quickness of her response. Beatrice likes you. And I'd like to learn more about my father. About Richard, Edward smiled, relieved. Thank you. He would have been very proud of the woman you've become, Carla. I'm sure of it. Carla picked up Beatrice from daycare and walked slowly home, her mind full of conflicting thoughts. Part of her still mistrusted, questioned whether Edward's story was true. But the document seemed authentic, and the photograph of her parents, that couldn't be faked. Besides, it explained his interest from the beginning. The seemingly selfless help, the frequent visits. At home, with Beatrice playing in the living room, Carla carefully examined each document Edward had given her. Her parents' marriage certificate, dated 26 years ago. The deed to the apartment where she now lived, in Richard Meadows' name. Bank statements from an account that contained a considerable sum, untouched all these years. Among the papers, she found something she hadn't noticed before, a small envelope with her name handwritten on it. Inside, a letter yellowed with age, dated 25 years ago. "My dearest daughter," the letter began, written in a firm hand. "I don't yet know if you will be a boy or a girl, but I already love you more than I could explain. If you are reading this, it is because something has happened to me. I hope your mother, Helen, is there to explain everything in person, but if not, I want you to know a few things." Carla read the letter with tears streaming freely down her face. It was a farewell letter, written by Richard weeks before the accident, as if he had a premonition that something might happen. It spoke of love, of hopes for the future, of how he wished to be a good father. It ended with a request: "Be happy, my love. Live fully. And remember that wherever I am, I'll be watching over you." When she finished reading, Carla felt as if a huge weight had been lifted from her shoulders. Her whole life had been marked by loss, abandonment, difficulties. Now she discovered that she had been loved even before she was born, by a father she never got to know, but who had planned and desired her existence. She looked at Beatrice, who was stacking colorful blocks on the rug, humming happily, oblivious to the emotional storm her mother was going through. The little one looked up and smiled, a smile so pure and genuine that it made Carla's heart ache. "Mommy," Beatrice called, extending a red block towards her. "Come." Carla joined her daughter on the floor, playing with the blocks while trying to organize her thoughts. One thing was clear. Regardless of the past, of what had happened before her birth, her future, and Beatrice's, seemed more secure now. Not just financially, but emotionally. She had found a connection to her roots, a part of her history that had always been missing. That night, after putting Beatrice to sleep, Carla sat on the apartment balcony, with her father's letter in her hands. Brightwater City's starry sky stretched above, and for the first time in a long time she felt truly at peace. She picked up her phone and sent a message to Edward. "Thank you for telling me the truth, and thank you for not giving up on finding me. I'd like to talk more about my father." "About our father?" The reply came almost immediately. "Anytime you wish, I'm here for you. I always have been." Carla smiled, carefully folding the letter and holding it close to her chest. The path ahead was still full of uncertainties, but now there was something new mixed in: hope. And for the first time since her mother passed, she no longer felt alone in the world. The following months brought significant changes in Carla's life. After the revelation about her true identity and family history, she began a gradual process of reconnecting with the past she had never known. Edward became a constant presence in her life, no longer as a mysterious benefactor, but as an uncle genuinely interested in strengthening family ties. Beatrice turned 2 with a simple but loving party in the apartment that Carla now knew was rightfully hers. Edward brought gifts, old photos, and most importantly, stories about Richard, the father Carla never knew. Each new story, each fragment of information, helped fill the void she had always felt, like pieces of a puzzle finally falling into place. "Your father loved music," Edward recounted during the party, as they watched Beatrice play with a toy piano he had brought. "He played the guitar since he was a teenager. He composed songs, some really good ones. I have some old recordings if you'd like to hear them someday." Carla nodded, moved. "I'd love to. I think I inherited that from him without knowing it. I've always enjoyed singing, although I've never learned an instrument." "It's never too late to start," Edward replied with a smile. Richard would say the same thing. Carla's business also prospered. With the money from her father's inheritance, which Edward had kept intact all these years, she managed to rent a small commercial space in the Lord's Quarter. She transformed it into a cozy pastry shop, where she sold her sweets and savory snacks, as well as coffees and drinks. Carla's Delights was no longer just a brand on packaging, but a physical establishment with regular customers and a growing reputation. She hired 2 employees, Mrs. Teresa, the former inn receptionist, who had become almost a grandmother to Beatrice, and a young gastronomy student named Luke, who brought innovative ideas and contagious enthusiasm. The shop, decorated with vibrant colors and a welcoming atmosphere, quickly became a neighborhood gathering spot. Carla was still surprised by the speed with which her life had changed. From homeless woman to successful entrepreneur in less than 2 years. From orphan unaware of her roots to heiress of a complex and rich family history. From single mother struggling to survive to a confident woman raising her daughter with security and stability. One quiet afternoon at the pastry shop, between the lunch and late afternoon rush, Carla was arranging new products in the display case when the door opened. An elegantly dressed, middle-aged woman entered hesitantly, looking around as if searching for something specific. "Good afternoon," Carla greeted with a professional smile. "How can I help you?" The woman stared at her for a long moment, her eyes scanning every detail of Carla's face with an intensity that made her feel uncomfortable. "Are you Carla Vance?" she finally asked, her voice trembling. Carla nodded cautiously. "Yes, I am. Do we know each other?" The woman took a step forward, still observing her with that strange intensity. "My name is Christine Meadows. I was married to Maurice Meadows, your father, Richard's cousin." Carla felt a wave of surprise. Another relative. Edward had mentioned cousins, aunts, and other family members, but she hadn't met any of them until now. "Does Edward know you're here?" Carla asked, her natural suspicions surfacing. Christine shook her head. "No, in fact, he probably wouldn't be happy to know. Edward and Maurice hadn't gotten along for years. My husband passed away 3 months ago, and since then I've been thinking a lot about family, about lost connections. When I heard that Edward had found Richard's daughter, the niece he searched for so many years, well, I felt I needed to meet you." Carla indicated a table in the most secluded corner of the pastry shop. "Please sit down. I'll get us some coffee." As she prepared the drinks, Carla tried to process this new twist. Edward had never mentioned a cousin named Maurice, much less that they had fallen out. What else might he be omitting? She returned with 2 cups of coffee and a plate of mini coconut custards, one of the house specialties. "So," she began, sitting opposite Christine, "how did you know about me?" Christine took a small sip of coffee before replying. Brightwater City may be a big city, but social circles are small. When Edward began to speak openly about having found Richard's daughter, the news spread. Besides, that video of you receiving the prize at the renewal store became quite well known. "I see," Carla replied, still cautious. "And what brings you here specifically?" Christine seemed to hesitate, as if carefully weighing her next words. "There are things about your family, about the relationship between Richard and Edward, that you might need to know. Things that Edward will probably never tell you." An alarm sounded in Carla's mind. Was she about to listen to family gossip from a woman she barely knew? On the other hand, her natural curiosity prevented her from simply dismissing Christine. What kind of things? Richard and Edward weren't just brothers. They were partners. They founded Renewal together 30 years ago. It was a small used furniture store at first, nothing like the empire it is today. This was new to Carla. Edward had mentioned that Richard worked with him in the family business, but he had never spoken about a partnership. Richard had the creative vision, Christine continued. He had innovative ideas, wanted to expand, modernize, while Edward was more conservative, concerned about the risks. They argued constantly about the direction the company should take. Carla tried to reconcile this image with what Edward had told her about her father, a free spirit. Yes, but never a visionary businessman. When Richard met Helen, your mother, things got worse, not just because of their parents' opposition, but because Richard started talking about selling his share of the company, using the money to start something new with Helen, maybe even moving to another country. Edward was furious. "Wait," Carla interrupted. "Are you implying that the accident that took my father's life wasn't really an accident?" Christine's eyes widened, looking genuinely shocked. "No, absolutely not. Edward loved Richard despite their differences. He would never do something like that. The accident was exactly that, a terrible accident." Carla relaxed a little, realizing she had jumped to an extreme conclusion. "What I'm saying," Christine continued, is that after the accident, Edward became the sole owner of Renewal. He bought Richard's share from their parents for a fraction of its real value. Helen should have received that share, or at least fought for it on behalf of the daughter she was carrying, but she fled, frightened by the threats and the trauma. "And why are you telling me this now?" Carla asked, a hint of irritation in her voice. "If it's for money—" "It's not for money," Christine interrupted. "It's for justice. For clarity. You deserve to know the whole story, not just the version Edward chose to share. Renewal today is worth billions. Half of that by rights should be yours." Carla felt her head spin. Billions? It was a scale she couldn't fully comprehend. Edward had given her Richard's personal inheritance, the apartment, some savings, but he had never mentioned anything about a share of the company. "I have documents," Christine said, opening her purse and taking out a folder. Copies of the original partnership agreement, old newspaper articles talking about the two founding brothers, the agreement made after Richard passed. Maurice kept all this for years. He always said that one day the truth would need to come out. Carla took the folder, but didn't open it immediately. "Why did your husband keep these documents? What was his interest in all of this?" Christine looked away for a moment. Maurice and Richard were close in their youth. They grew up together, they were like brothers. When Richard and Edward founded Renewal, they invited Maurice to be a partner too. But he refused, preferring to pursue a career in law. He always regretted that, especially after Richard was gone. He felt he should have been there, mediating the conflicts between the brothers. He felt guilty, Carla concluded. Yes, and when he learned how Edward had taken full control of the company, he felt it was a betrayal of Richard's memory. Maurice spent years collecting information, documents, everything that could one day help Richard's daughter. You claim what was rightfully hers. Carla finally opened the folder and began to examine the documents. They seemed authentic. Contracts with signatures, newspaper clippings yellowed with age, photographs of two smiling young men in front of a small store with the sign Renewal Furniture. "Why would Edward hide this from me?" Carla murmured, more to herself than to Christine. "They always seem so sincere about wanting to help me, about connecting with family." "I don't doubt that he genuinely wants to connect with you," Christine replied. "Edward always suffered from the loss of his brother and the disappearance of Helen and the child. He searched for them for years. But that doesn't mean he's willing to give up half of his corporate empire, even if morally it's the right thing to do." Carla closed the folder, feeling overwhelmed. She needed time to process all of this, to verify the authenticity of the documents, to decide what to do with this information. "Thank you for sharing this with me," she finally said. "I'll review everything calmly." Christine nodded, understanding. "It's a lot to absorb, I know. I just thought you deserved to know. What you do with this information is entirely your choice." She took a pen and wrote a phone number on a napkin. "If you need to talk or have questions, you can call me any time." After Christine left, Carla asked Luke to take over the pastry shop for the rest of the day. She needed to think, she needed air. She walked aimlessly through the tree-lined streets of the neighborhood, the folder with the documents weighing in her bag as if it were made of lead. Why hadn't Edward mentioned the partnership with Richard? Why hide that half of the Renewal Company, now a commercial empire, should legitimately belong to her? Could it be possible that, despite all the apparent kindness and concern, he was just protecting his financial interests? Her steps led her unconsciously to Central Park, where she used to spend hours when she lived on the streets. She sat on a bench in the shade, watching children play in the playground, couples strolling hand in hand, elderly people reading newspapers. The normal life she now also had. She picked up her phone and called Edward. "We need to talk," she said simply when he answered. "It's important." Half an hour later, he met her on the same bench. He looked worried, his brow furrowed into small wrinkles. "Did something happen?" "Is Beatrice okay?" "Beatrice is fine at daycare," Carla replied. "It's about something else." She opened her bag and took out the folder. "I had a visitor today. Christine Meadows, Morris's widow, my father's cousin." Edward's face visibly paled. He sat beside her, his eyes fixed on the folder. What did she want? "To tell me the truth, or at least her version of the truth." Carla opened the folder, showing the documents. "Apparently my father wasn't just your brother. He was your partner in founding Renewal. And theoretically half of the company should be mine by right." Edward closed his eyes for a moment, as if gathering strength. When he opened them again, there was a mixture of resignation and sadness in them. "I was going to tell you," he finally said. "I was waiting for the right moment, when our relationship was more established. The right moment to tell me I'm the heiress to a commercial empire. When would that be, Edward? 10 years from now? 20? It's not that simple, Carla. Legally, Richard sold his share of the company before the accident. To our parents, not to me directly. It was a maneuver to protect the business during a difficult phase we were going through. The intention was to buy back his share later, when things stabilized. But that never happened. No, the accident occurred before, and then, with Helen gone, my parents assumed total control of that share. Years later, when they passed, I inherited everything. Legally, everything was done within the rules." Carla absorbed the information, trying to separate facts from interpretations. "And morally. Do you think that was right, to let your pregnant mother flee frightened with nothing, while your family took control of everything?" Edward seemed genuinely hurt by the accusation. "I looked for Helen. I swear I looked. I wanted to help her, to ensure that you and she were safe and well cared for. But she didn't want to be found. And when you finally found me, you decided not to mention that I'm the heiress to half of $1 billion company." "Carla, please. It wasn't like that. When I found you, my first concern was to help you out of the terrible situation you were in. Then I wanted to get to know you, to establish a real bond, not one based on money or interests. And yes, I feared that if I told you about renewal immediately, you would think it was all a scam or worse, that you would see me only as a source of money, not as family." There was logic in what he said, Carla had to admit, and so far, Edward had been nothing short of generous and thoughtful. He had helped her rebuild her life. He had shared stories and memories of her father. He had become a constant and positive presence in Beatrice's life. "What do you intend to do now?" he asked, his voice laden with apprehension. Carla looked around at the park full of life, at Brightwater City's blue sky, at the people passing by, oblivious to the drama unfolding on that simple bench. She thought of her pastry shop, the comfortable apartment where she raised her daughter, the stability she had achieved after so much struggle. "I don't know," she replied honestly. "I need to think, to process all of this." Edward nodded, respecting her answer. "I understand. And know that whatever you decide, my door will always be open for you and Beatrice. You are my family, Carla. The only family I have left." They walked together in silence to the parking lot. Before they parted, Edward added, "If you want to learn more about renewal, about how it works, about its real value, I'm willing to share everything. No secrets this time. And if you decide you want to claim your share, we'll find a way." Carla nodded but didn't reply. There was much to consider, many unanswered questions, many possibilities to evaluate. The following days were filled with intense reflection for Carla. She hired a lawyer recommended by Jane to analyze the documents provided by Christine and verify their legal implications. She also asked Edward for all official records related to the transfer of Richard's share in the company. She delved into research on Renewal's history, its growth over the years, its current market value. The more she learned, the more she realized the complexity of the situation. Legally, Edward was protected. All transfers had followed the correct procedures. But morally, there was a gray area that could not be ignored. A week after Christine's visit, Carla invited Edward to dinner at her apartment. Beatrice was already asleep when he arrived, bringing a red wine that he left on the table unopened. Sensing the serious atmosphere that hung in the air, "Thank you for coming," Carla said, indicating the living room table, where she had prepared a simple dinner. "I wanted to talk in a quiet environment, without interruptions." They sat down and Carla served the food, a mushroom risotto that was her specialty. For a few minutes they ate in silence until Edward finally asked, "Have you decided what you want to do?" Carla put down her fork and looked directly into his eyes. "Yes, after much thought, after talking to a lawyer, after analyzing all the options, I came to a conclusion." Edward waited tense. "I don't want half of Renewal," she finally said. "I don't want to get into a legal battle. I don't want billions. I don't want headlines in the newspapers, or to be known as the heiress who appeared out of nowhere to claim an empire." Edward seemed surprised and visibly relieved. Carla, She raised her hand, interrupting him. But I also don't think it's fair that my father's contribution to the company's founding is simply erased, forgotten. He played an important role at the beginning of everything. You admitted that yourself. And as his daughter, I feel I have a responsibility to honor that legacy. What exactly are you proposing? I want Richard Meadows' name to be officially recognized as co-founder of Renewal in all company records, on its website, in its official history. I want a percentage of the annual profits. It doesn't have to be half. It can be something symbolic like 5%, to be allocated to a foundation in his name, to help homeless families, especially single mothers with young children. Edward listened attentively, his face softening as he understood the proposal. And I want to participate in this foundation, Carla continued, not as an employee or beneficiary, but as a director. I want to use my experience, my knowledge of the real difficulties these families face, to create programs that truly make a difference, that offer not just temporary shelter or basic assistance, but concrete paths to autonomy and dignity. It's an incredible proposal, Edward replied, genuinely impressed. And perfectly viable. In fact, it's something Richard would have loved. He always talked about how companies should have social responsibility, how we should use our success to help others. Carla smiled, feeling connected to the father she had never known. I imagine so from what you told me about him. I'll make it happen, Edward promised. The official recognition, the foundation, everything. And you'll have complete freedom to shape the programs, define the priorities. There's one more thing, Carla added. I want to expand my pastry shop, not just as a business but as a training space. I want to offer culinary courses to vulnerable people, give them the skills that helped me start over. And eventually I want to open branches in other neighborhoods, create a network that not only sells quality products, but also employs and empowers people who need a second chance. Edward watched her with an ever-widening smile. You truly are Richard's daughter. The same vision, the same desire to make a difference. And for that, she continued, I'll need investment. I don't want it to be a donation or a gift. I want a real investment, with you as a minority partner, with clear contracts and defined expectations. Done, he replied without hesitation. It will be a pleasure to be your partner, Carla. In fact, it will be an honor. They sealed the agreement with a toast, finally opening the wine Edward had brought. The tension that had been between them in recent weeks dissipated, replaced by a feeling of mutual understanding and shared possibilities. 6 months later, on a sunny Saturday morning, a small crowd gathered in front of a renovated building in the east end of Brightwater City, not far from the rebirth shelter where Carla had spent so many difficult nights. The previously abandoned building now sported a colorful and inviting facade, with a large sign, Richard Meadows Foundation Training and Support Center. Carla, wearing an elegant but simple outfit, held Beatrice's hand, now 2.5 years old, wearing a floral dress with her hair in pigtails. Beside them, Edward smiled proudly, holding a large ceremonial scissors. It is with immense joy that we inaugurate this space today, Carla began, addressing those present. A mix of local authorities, journalists, neighborhood residents, and most importantly, vulnerable families who would be the first beneficiaries of the programs. A place born from the belief that everyone deserves an opportunity, a fresh start, a path to dignity. She briefly recounted her story, without dramatization or exaggeration, just the simple truth of a woman who faced extreme difficulties and found, through a combination of luck, determination, and support, a way to rebuild her life. This center will offer much more than temporary shelter or basic assistance. Here people will find vocational courses, legal support, psychological counseling, daycare for their children while they study or work, and a microcredit program for small entrepreneurs. Because we believe that true transformation comes from autonomy, not dependence. At the back of the hall, Carla spotted a familiar face, Mrs. Teresa, now manager of the first branch of Carla's Delights, located within the center itself, where it would serve as a training space for new pastry chefs and cooks. Beside her, Luke, promoted to chef instructor, smiled enthusiastically. Also present was Jane, her neighbor and friend, who had become the official designer for all the Foundations and Pastry Network's materials. And, surprisingly, Christine Meadows, who after the initial turmoil had become an important ally in developing the Foundation's legal programs. This place bears the name of my father, Richard Meadows, a man I didn't have the chance to know, but whose legacy of creativity, vision, and compassion I hope to honor every day. And it would not be possible without the support and partnership of his brother, my uncle Edward Meadows, who believed in this dream from the beginning. Edward stepped forward, emotional, and together they cut the inaugural ribbon to enthusiastic applause. Beatrice, imitating the adults, clapped happily, not fully understanding the meaning of that moment, but instinctively feeling its importance. As the guests explored the facilities, Carla and Edward remained for a moment at the entrance, contemplating the commemorative plaque that briefly told the story of Richard and his role in founding Renewal, concluding with the phrase he had written in the letter to the daughter who had not yet been born, "Live fully, and remember that wherever I am, I'll be watching over you." "I think he would be proud," Edward said, his voice choked with emotion, "of all this, of you." "I think he would be proud of both of us," Carla replied, gently squeezing his hand, for finally honoring his legacy in the right way. Beatrice, tired of standing still, tugged at her mother's hand. "Mommy, let's see the toys." Carla smiled at her daughter, then looked again at Edward. "Shall we? There's a lot to explore." Together they entered the center, not only as relatives whom fate had separated and reunited, but as partners in a shared mission. A mission that had begun with a simple promotional flyer on a Brightwater City sidewalk, and that now expanded to touch the lives of countless families in situations similar to what Carla had faced. As they walked through the colorful corridors, greeting people, explaining the programs, showing the facilities, Carla felt a deep peace. The circle that had begun with so much suffering was closing in a way she could never have imagined. Her life had indeed transformed, but most importantly, she now had the power to transform other lives, to create opportunities where before there had only been despair, to offer hope where before only resignation existed. At the end of the day, after the inauguration event, Carla returned home with Beatrice asleep in her arms. She put her daughter to bed and went to the apartment balcony, watching the city lights turn on one by one against the darkening sky. Somewhere in that urban vastness, other Carlas were at this very moment facing the same challenges she had faced. They slept in crowded shelters, on park benches, on cold sidewalks, with their children in their arms and fear in their hearts. Tomorrow, some of them would find their way to the Richard Meadows Center, and although Carla knew she couldn't save everyone, that the challenges were immense and resources always limited, she felt profoundly grateful to be able to do her part. To be able to transform her own story of pain into a tool for good. On the small table on the balcony, an envelope awaited her. Edward had discreetly handed it to her during the event, asking her to read it when she was alone. Inside, there was a small box and a handwritten note. "Dearest Carla, this necklace belonged to your grandmother, my mother. She would want you to have it. It is a tradition in the Meadows family to pass this piece to the youngest woman of each generation. For many years I kept it, waiting to find you. Now it is finally where it always should have been. With affection, Edward." In the small velvet box, a delicate gold necklace with a phoenix-shaped pendant, the symbol of rebirth that, coincidentally, had inspired the name of the Renewal store so many years ago. Carla put on the necklace and touched the pendant, feeling connected not only to her past, but also to her future. A future that, despite all the setbacks, broken promises and pains faced, finally seemed to shine with limitless possibilities. And as night fell over Brightwater City, enveloping the city in its starry mantle, Carla made a silent promise to herself, to her daughter, and to all the families who would one day cross the doors of the Richard Meadows Center. The journey may begin in darkness, but with courage, perseverance, and mutual support, there is always a path to the light. Dear listeners, we hope Carla and Beatrice's story has touched your hearts. For more emotional stories like this, we have prepared a special playlist that you can find by clicking to the left. If this narrative of overcoming adversity and fresh starts moved your emotions, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and leave a like. Tell us in the comments which city you're watching from and what part of the story moved you the most. Every day we bring new stories that explore the complexity of life with its challenges and triumphs. Your opinion is very important to us. We eagerly await your comments and suggestions for future stories. Until next time.